bigger isn't always better, and that means a lot coming from me. I'm a very ambitious person and I really enjoyed this hobby because I wanted to take small plants and grow them as large as possible, as quickly as possible within my indoor setting. Now that was all great over the first few years and I had great success, and I managed to grow some plants really quickly into really big statement pieces that I can decorate my house with. But as this hobby is progressing, as my collection is growing, I'm having a challenge in displaying some of these large plants. And with that came a bit of a shift in thinking. I'm no longer just aiming to grow each plant as large as possible or as quickly as possible. I'm actually grateful when plants take their sweet time, because it just means a little bit less work from my end. And if a plant stays compact and doesn't become super mature, it is much easier to display it in my house as well. So these days I'm much more picky with which plants I want to see mature. And one of the plants that just didn't really look that good when it matured was my Philodendron sodiroi. Now this is what it looks like 12 months later. 12 months ago, the sodiroi was really looking somewhat terrible.
I can't tell you how sick I am of this plant. Is this even in frame? Probably not, huh?
Each leaf in itself was kind of okay, but it just didn't really have a nice display site. So I decided something needs to change. And look, I didn't go into this with a really clear plan. I just knew that the way that I have been growing it over the past 3 or 4 years wasn't really yielding the results that I was after. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. So 12 months ago, I decided to fundamentally chop that plant apart in an attempt to grow this plant differently, to hopefully get different and better results. And in today's video, we're looking back at my decision making 12 months ago, and then we're following the whole progress over the course of 12 months until the plant looks like this. So, lots happening today. Let's get started. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I suppose the intro said it all. Today we're looking at my Philodendron sodiroi, and I'm trying to grow it into a nice display without maturing it, which is kind of unusual for me. So let's all get on the same page and take it back to Jan from 12 months ago. And I would also love to use this opportunity to ask you to give this video a thumbs up, leave a nice comment down below, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It's for free for you, but means the world to me, so in advance I really appreciate it. But let's have a look at what happened.
Yes, this is my Philodendron sodiroi, and for the last year or so I've just really disliked this plant for a couple of reasons. First of all, this one is quite front heavy and top heavy, so I'm having a really hard time keeping it upright. Secondly, it spreads way too much. I have nowhere to display this plant. And thirdly, because I have nowhere to display this plant, it's always just kind of taken the back seat. It's kind of just gone into the worst corner that I could find just to perpetuate the issue. So as a result of it, I'm also not really giving it the best conditions to really make it thrive. Overall, I grow plants for aesthetic reasons, and this plant is just not cutting it. It's just not looking good. And it hasn't always been the case. This plant actually looked amazing like 2 years ago. And I wanted to get back to that. So today we're going to do some fundamental chopping. Sorry. Actually not sorry at all. But I want to show you what I've done in preparation for this. I have chopped this plant in a couple of spots. Here, and here. Now you can see that this bottom part, for example, shot in 3 spaces, here, here and here. I think only one is really going to develop. That next cutting completely shriveled up, so obviously that didn't like it. The next cutting also completely shriveled up, so those 2 are dead. The next one hasn't done anything, but it's starting to shrivel up a bit. So not super confident, but there is a little piece coming out here. See how we go. And then over here there's one with a new shoot as well. And then obviously the top part, I reckon I could have chopped more bits here. I don't 100% know what exactly I'm going to do over here, but I know that I just don't want it to be the way that it is right now. It is growing at the top and it's growing kind of cute-ish leaves. I'm not mad at the size of the leaves, but I'm mad at the size of the petioles and the spread, and it's just taking up too much space. And it's not, like, each leaf in itself is not bad, but it's just not giving me like the display that I want. And even managing with some twine, as you saw, I just cut some twine off. Even managing it with twine wasn't really helping. Also, I've done a video on moss pole longevity with this plant, because this bottom part over here is over 3 years old now, and the moss pole is still going strong. I mean, you can see that the root system within the moss pole enabled this cutting over here to reshoot. So I think in general this plant has just been on this pole for too long. Something needs to change. Now the first thing I want to change is I want to, where does this big cutting start here? I want to separate this part from the bottom part. So I'm going to chop the pole over here. Keep in mind by now, and I come a bit closer in a sec once I've separated it and I can actually show you, maneuver it a little bit better. At this stage, the pole and the plant is the same, right? I don't differentiate between the pole and the plant. If I say I chop the plant, I also mean I chop the pole. They're just thoroughly intertwined. Now there's also heaps and heaps of roots here. I just have to cut through the pole and potentially cut some of the roots. Normally, if the plant has been on the pole for less time, I try and like free some of the roots, especially if they're growing on the outside. But over here, I think this is going to be a lost cause. Well, it would be a waste of time. Now I can show you a bit closer, that's easier to maneuver. So you can see lots and lots of roots over here. I'm just going to pot this back up and then see how all of these empty nodes are now actually just in the pot, and all of these roots are in the pot and hopefully can expand and build a larger root system. Now I can do that straight away because this I already cut months ago, so this has already thoroughly colored over, so no risk of drought over here. So I parked the bottom part on the side. We're going to have a look at that in a sec. Before I pot this all up, let me also just get rid of a few ugly leaves that I don't enjoy, so I'm having an easier time. I don't enjoy any of these. These don't look too bad just yet. Huh? You know what, if I cut this leaf as well, then well, the leaf in itself wasn't that bad. I'm drastically reducing the spread of this plant, right? Yeah, now I just need to move this leaf over and this ugly leaf. And then it's kind of like fairly well contained. You know what, let's do that for now. Usually I like to empty the moss from the bottom part of the pole, the part that's potted up, just to ensure that it doesn't have super crazy water retention. But in this instance, you saw how deeply the root system has rooted into that pole. I would just destroy too many roots. And secondly, I've actually become really, really good at watering my moss poles without excess water going into the pot, to the extent that I almost struggle underwatering my pots. So I'm not concerned, but if you're concerned about the amount of water that you'll be providing to the pole and you are worried about excess water dripping into the pot and then causing overwatering in the pot as a result of it, then yeah, it would be a good idea to keep a really chunky mix. You can see how I'm potting this up with a fairly decent backwards tilt. That's because, well, all of the leaves are pushing it over to this side. Have I even done this straight? It's fairly straight. Actually, I think downstairs I have a slightly smaller garden stake that I could use. I don't want to use this one because this garden stake would actually exceed the pole and look hideous. Let me look at it from your point of view. Oh my god, it's still so ugly. But this leaf definitely has to go. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do a few more chops. Wow, the philodendron smell is insane. Here guys,
See how this is where the extension is from the previous pole extension. See how this is now kind of a bit of a course for instability. So let me quickly go downstairs, especially because I cut this stem here. Let me go downstairs and I'll get a garden stake to help the stability issues.
Alrighty-o, garden stake. This garden stake is not very... Oh my god, is it going to be too large as well? Ah, shit. There you go, better. This pole is also so dry. Is this kind of still tilted backwards a bit? Maybe one more cut here. It's almost like the leaves are so heavy it's dragging down the cutting. So what, we've got this tiny cutting up here now with the 3 leaves. And then we've got this more mature one. The problem here is that not many of these cuttings have actually rooted into, not all nodes have rooted into the pole. Shit, what did I do? Now I really fucked it. So, not all, as I just said, not all of these have solely rooted into the pole, which is why these cuttings are now not sticking on here, and also obviously doesn't really make it a viable cutting for regrowers. It's not ideal. So let me secure them over here with some cable ties so that they're at least not flopping over, and then let me go against all my principles today. Why not? Ah, come on. Oh my god, the philodendron smell is so overwhelming. This one is extremely strong, the sodiroi smell. Has anybody else noticed that? How strong the sodiroi smells? Very peppery. Sorry, I'm just cutting anything off that is pissing me off today. While we're causing absolute chaos, let's make it even worse, and let's finally do the thing that I always said I hate doing, but I've seen a lot of people do, which is cling wrap their plants to the pole. Now what this is going to do is it's going to increase the humidity around the node, and it's going to cause nodes to grow more roots. I'm not very happy with the root system that this plant has. And I'm also clearly not very good at using cling wrap. Quite clearly you can see this is the first time I'm doing this, and there's absolutely no method to my madness. As you can see, I don't often use cling wrap, full stop, right? I'm not really good at it. I don't want to make it too tight because I don't want there to be airflow issues. Have a look at this. Nice and ugly. So what I'll do is I'll park this over here for now. And I pop a bottle on it. And I obviously need to water the pot as well, but I'll take it outside for that in a sec. You know what? Fuck you cutting. It's just making it too front heavy and unstable. So sometimes if the water doesn't want to flow, just wiggle it around a little bit until you see the water, the air bubbles popping out. Come on. There we go. That's the spot. Okay, 2 more casualties. And look, I'll pop them in a vase. It's fine. Won't fully go to waste. Okay, in the meantime, I have this. I want to show you. So yes, there are some roots that went from the top into the bottom, but from my experience, it's not as big of an issue as one might think. This is now cute and, you know, small. I will pop this in my greenhouse and hopefully this will reshoot, but I won't do anything further with it. Yeah. Right, here we are. Let me find a vase for these. Maybe I can do something nice with them. I love how I say here we are and then I leave instantly. No, I have a really nice vase outside. But this one should also, come on, let's finish this off. We don't have forever. I will take it outside to water in the pot though. And I'll be back with the nice vase. Oh, maybe it wasn't the perfect vase for it. See if, definitely not a florist. But if I maybe just layer them a little bit. Like this. Cute, huh? Better than nothing. Anyway, I know I was pretty rough with cutting this back, but honestly, life is too short to look at ugly plants or reserve a whole corner of my room for a plant that I don't enjoy looking at. So I had to do something about it. For me, it's about growing. It's about, you know, trying new things, about enjoying every new growth. It's not about owning. It's not about just having the largest plant. So I think it was time for a reset after, like, I've given the plant almost a year to kind of like turn it around, but she just didn't pull through. So anyway, let's trust the process and let's see what this plant looks like. Well, eventually we'll find out. Hello, and we're back. It has been just over 2 months hello darling, that I've cut this plant, and I think it's gone quite well, but I really want to peel off that cling wrap. In some areas it's already coming off itself because I'm really hating the look of it. And I suppose let me take it off and then we can look at what happened and whether or not this was a good decision or not. I have not taken this off since I put it on in those 2 months, but remember I kind of wrapped it around pretty loosely, like it wasn't the tightest wrap ever. But I definitely think that it was drying out less quickly than other plants in the same position that don't have the cling wrap. So I suppose it did help with the water retention, right? That's for sure. Alrighty, now let me bring you closer. Okay, so this is all one big top cutting, right? And I left it a little bit bigger so that the plant isn't resetting all too much. So there is a new leaf unfurling over here. But yeah, it's going to take its sweet time, but it's okay. I'm not in a rush, right? You can see the caterpillar over here. That's all good. Cut number 1 over here has a new shoot, but can you see this? The top is also kind of rotten. The bottom seems fine. Shoot number 2 seems fine. Also has a big new shoot. That's very good news. It technically has a second node down here, but I didn't fully activate it. Piece number 3, or what are we? Yeah, 3 over here also feels a little bit soft at the top, but not as not as moist as this one over here. A little drier, but also has a new shoot. And then the bottom part, the one that's potted up, has actually given me 2 shoots. One here, and then quite a thick one over here that's already showing a leaf. Now, if we're looking at the back, I can't actually see any new roots that are going into the pole as a result of the cling wrap. That doesn't mean that there's no roots that went in. There could have been from the front, or like they could be hidden or something like that, but I haven't seen any action in the root department for this plant. Now let me quickly cut off this top bit over here that's a bit rotten. Now I'm happy with the new shoots that it's showing, right? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new shoots, and then obviously still the mother plant at the top over here. So, and I'm actually really happy with leaves of around that size. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. I don't want this to be too big. But yeah, I think I need to give it a little bit more time to actually show some nice growth. And then maybe once I can see a few leaves from these shoots down here, I'll do something with it. But yeah, I don't know if the cling wrap necessarily assisted in this. I mean, we are in the middle of spring and summer now over here in Australia, the best part of the year when it comes to growing conditions. And all of my other plants that are in the same room in my office, they're all throwing out leaves at the moment. And I mean, I haven't propagated any of them, but I think this time of the year, plants are having an easy time growing anyway. I don't think that the cling wrap really did anything over here, apart from increasing the risk of rotting stems. But yeah, look, it was only one experiment and I probably didn't do the best job wrapping the cling wrap in the first place and so on. So obviously this is not like a comprehensive experiment with a hard and fast conclusion that it's not worth it. But from my experience with this, I don't think the cling wrap was needed. It just looked hideous. It increases the risk of rot, and well, we're also just using more materials that we don't have to use necessarily. Anyway, I'll pop this back into my office and we'll see each other once, well, there's something to show you. See you soon. Hello, and we are back. Today is the big day. I need to chop this plant because I need to make a little bit more room in my office. This plant is just taking up a little bit too much real estate and is not giving enough beauty. So, just to give you a little update, the bottom part, the pot in itself, has given me 2 leaves over here. There is a sad looking shoot over here, a pretty sad looking shoot here, but better than nothing. And then we've got this top cutting over here that's now pushing out a new leaf. Now I can very much see a difference between these 3 leaves and the previous 3 leaves. If you look at this, much shorter petioles over here than over here, right? Now, I have moved it in position. I think it could be a result of the change in light exposure. I think it could also be a result of me chopping it and the plant being more juvenile. The leaf size in itself is not all too different though. So, whatever I'm doing, it's working already a little bit, right? This is much more manageable than this. I have thought about this so much, way too much to be honest. And obviously I spoke about it a few times and I'm just gonna start chopping a little bit. Am I? I think let me get a table and a bucket because it's gonna get messy. I was thinking about this way too much and I spoke about it quite a, oh my god, a lizard. Hang on, look. Just got this box from us. Oh, that's my phone, at least not the plant. Look at the little lizard. Hello. Ah! No, come back in here. Oh, go outside, come on. Come on. Go outside, quick. Go this way. Go outside. Yes, good boy. Brad loves playing with them. By the way, Brad has been so weird. The last few days he goes up, like upstairs, and has a little nap there. I don't know, maybe it's because it's cooling down a little bit and upstairs is really nice and warm. I don't know. Anyway, where was I going with this? Okay, let's start the sentence for the 3rd time. I've been thinking about this way too much, honestly. But also I've been talking about it, so I've gotten a lot of feedback online about what I should do with this plant. First of all, most people say, if I don't enjoy a plant, I should just get rid of it. And I get that, but you gotta keep in mind that if I would get rid of the plants that I don't like in the moment, I wouldn't be able to do this video, for example. Or I have a video recently that went really well the one about my fry deck, I wouldn't be able to do these sort of videos if I would get rid of my plants, right? So sometimes I keep these plants and I experiment with them because first of all, I have nothing to lose, so I'm a little bit more likely to try something different with a plant that I don't really care about all too much, right? Like I'm not gonna try something brand new with my favorite plant, unless I have 3 of them, which I actually do. There's actually a dead node over here as well that didn't do anything. I figured the plant didn't have the best root system. What I'm gonna do over here is nothing. I'm just gonna keep this as it is, I reckon, because it is growing nicely and it is growing with very short internodal spacing and decent leaves. I'm almost thinking I'm gonna cut the pole off so that the plant doesn't even bother ever attaching to the pole, because as I just mentioned, plants that I don't necessarily have all too much emotional attachment with or to are great ways to experiment. So I'm gonna try and experiment growing this not on a pole, right? I've tried it on a pole and I mean it worked, but it didn't yield the results that I wanted. So why don't I just do absolutely nothing with this and keep it as it is? Worst case scenario, I will pass it on to Tim. Tim doesn't have one of those just yet. Anyway, so I was talking about why I don't give them away, right? So I can experiment and I can create content. And that's exactly what we're doing today. So some people in the comments were saying that if I don't want it to mature, which is essentially what I'm trying to achieve, I'm trying to grow a more juvenile version of this plant, I shouldn't give it a moss pole. Now I get the principle behind it, as in like, well, of course the moss pole is a great tool to help me mature the plant, but ultimately the maturity is really set by the conditions. These plants mature in nature and nobody gives them a moss pole, right? I think in itself, just giving it a moss pole does not equal maturity for the plant. However, it's definitely increasing my chances of it reaching maturity, which is what I don't want. So I think there is a point in trying a non-moss pole support, but I still need to make sure that the conditions I give it are good enough for it to grow, but not that amazing that it wants to grow very much, if you know what I mean. I don't want it to mature. So I'm just pulling a few old roots out of this pole to see if I want to reuse this moss. This pole was actually super old, right? I think this pole was over 3 years old, but I think the moss is still looking fine. Smells fine as well. So basically, I think not giving it a moss pole is a good approach. I think in itself it's not gonna miraculously solve my issue, but I think it's gonna give me better chances of potentially solving the issue. Did that just... yeah, that just fell off, huh? Not giving it a moss pole. You know, I have a pop box upstairs. I might just put that in the pop box and see what happens. Same with this node. Anyway, it is what it is. Alright, those people that get really upset when I cut off leaves, look away now. Okay, you can open your eyes again. See, this is what I wanted from this plant. Actually, I'm gonna cut off one more node down here. I was also thinking about potentially giving this no support at all, but I don't think that's necessarily going to give me the result that I want either. They have really shitty roots in the pole anyway. Honestly, I don't think the pole did much for this plant. Okay, it has some roots, but they look really sad and dried, to be honest. So I think all of these ones over here will go upstairs into my prop box. There's no point in incorporating them now. So that's a bit disappointing, because the whole idea was that I multi-planted. I mean, I still have the base. Maybe I should multi-plant it then. Because actually thinking about it, I do have the original base outside still, right? This is actually like the second base. Okay, all of the moss that I can reuse, yay! And as I mentioned before, we are no longer growing this plant on a moss pole. We're trying something different. So I'm going to chop off the top of the pole over here. The bit that nothing has attached to this yet. There you go. and I can just reuse this. And nothing has ever attached to this, so I don't even need to look out for roots. I can just open that up and reuse the moss. Okay, now the question is, what do I do with this? I don't like freeing up plants from the moss pole. Once the plant has thoroughly rooted into the pole, they're like one unit. I don't differentiate between the plant and the pole. They are one thing. And yes, I want this plant to stay juvenile, but I also don't want to induce just way too much shock. So I reckon I'll keep it that way. But it's going to be a bit of a weird setup. I need to unpot this. Oh my god, it has no roots. Oh, hang on, it had no roots, right? Oh yeah, it was a chop and extend. All of the roots should be within the pole. That's crazy. I would have expected to have a few more roots, but I was pretty terrible at watering this plant. I remember there was definitely a few times where I let it dry out way too much, so maybe I also caused some issues. So I'm thinking I just put these two poles in here for now. Obviously make them overlap a little bit, so at least the plant is growing and it's looking nice and lush for now. And then I'm just gonna put a garden and I'm gonna put a piece of bark in there, iron bark in here, so that hopefully eventually the plant can grow off the poles and then onto the thing. Now I don't love having the really water retentive moss poles in the pot right now, but I don't think I can really change that. The only way to change that would be to take the plant off the pole, and I would ruin even more roots with that approach. And as you just saw, the other one didn't even have any roots outside the pole in the first place. So I think keeping the roots within the pole is a pretty smart idea for now. I just need to keep that in mind and be a little bit more conservative when I water, because this mix is going to have really good water retention now due to all of the moss in the center. But because I basically from now on only really have to water the pot anyway, I don't need to water the moss pole anymore, and I'm obviously not going to water the piece of wood because it's not going to retain moisture anyway. I reckon it's going to be a bit easier, but definitely a good thing to have a clear pot. Alright, and here we are, that's it. I definitely gave this a bit of a backwards tilt in anticipation for this to climb up here, and then obviously you can see these leaves push forward. But you can see these leaves, or like these nodes, now I just need to bridge the gap between the pole and this piece of iron bark. Maybe I can I? That's not really cable tieable, huh? I'll just put a rock here. And that's it. Right, I'll see you soon.
And here we are. So it's been 12 months since I kind of started doing something about this plant, and it's been 5 months since I potted them up, kind of. Let's address the top bit first, and I also want to show you that little bit that I cut off ages ago already. Anyway. First things first, let's have a look at this part. Now, unfortunately, I haven't really achieved my goal of making this plant juvenile. The leaves are quite big, yet again. The petioles are really long, yet again. But at least everything is happening down here, right? So it is part of my wall of aeroids in my office, and over there I've got lots and lots of big plants. But most of these plants have long petioles kind of up there, right? They grow up moss pods, and then up there they have really long petioles and big leaves. Not many leaves are big with long petioles and are that close to the floor, if you know what I mean. So this plant is perfect to put under another plant to kind of fill in the bottom part of the wall of aeroids. So while it still takes up a lot of space and is actually quite mature, kind of what I try to avoid, it kind of fits into this setup that I'm currently using. So I'm not mad at it, but as such, I haven't really achieved my goal. Let me bring you a bit closer. I think the first thing we really need to address is, I think in 5 months ago, it was just at the level of the moss pole over here. You can see that the node has started growing roots, and then the roots were attracted to the moss, grew into the moss. Now the next root is being attracted to the wood over here. So it's going to anchor into the wood. which obviously, if I would ever want to remove it from that wood, I would just have to rip it and all the roots would rip, right? So that's kind of why I usually don't like wood, but I suppose it would take a long time for this plant to ever do that, so it's okay. There's also a new leaf coming over here, which is kind of super cute. The leaves are beautiful with the red veining, so I'm not mad at this plant at all. You can see quite a bit of extra floral nectaries, or the nectar from the extra floral nectaries at the front. I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but these shiny little dots. Hey darling. That in itself is not a bad thing. Extra floral nectaries extract this little nectar, and that is to attract beneficial insects or deter pests. It's a healthy thing, and usually I only see that happening with healthy plants, so I'm not mad at that. So in case you have a sodiroi and you see that, it is not a concern. We have established a very, very, very healthy root system. Always forget about these. Oh. Very, 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 very healthy. So very happy with that. Now the second plant on this pole over here has been aborted. This has not moved in months. So yeah, I'm not too sure why and what and how. I mean, I didn't treat these two differently, but yeah, that's unfortunate. But because the sodiroi is growing with such short internodal spacing, and it ultimately ended up maturing really nicely again, I think a second plant in here would actually just make it quite messy, right? I mean, the plant is growing so compact that the leaves are overlapping by itself, even if there's just one plant, right? If I compare that to a verrucosum, for example, that has really long internodal spacing, put it back. With a verrucosum, where each internodal spacing can be this long, it makes sense to multi-plant it so that another plant can fill in the gaps and so on. So basically, kind of good, no? I mean, everything is really well, it's growing really well. I'm definitely a bit worried about this gap over here, right? Like, I hope that the plant will slowly move its way onto the wood directly, which is obviously a bit of a shame. I should have probably, maybe I can squish the moss pole a bit, but I also don't want to hurt anything. Yeah, I hope it's just slowly going to find its own way towards the wood, so we don't have this awkward gap, because it obviously creates like instability, right? Like, I don't want the plant to just be attached to the support via these little bridges of roots, but we'll see. If you think back at all the updates throughout and so on, I obviously didn't really care too much about this plant. I feel like I don't really have anything to lose, because even if this plant would completely die back and I just need to reshoot it from like a stem piece, I don't really mind, to be honest. I was actually aiming for a juvenile plant, so it's almost like it did too well, you know what I mean? Not complaining, but wasn't necessarily what I was aiming for. Now, what I was actually aiming for is something like this. And this is the bottom part from the initial chop. And I gave this to Tim. And he's been growing it. His light source comes from the top. That's why the leaves all face up. So I'm going to point it like that. But that is actually what I was after. I wanted to have these size leaves. And you can also see that the silver is more dominant in these smaller leaves compared to the larger ones. So I really, really wanted that. And over here you can see how like double or triple planting could have made this really, really nice, right? You can see how the stem was quite thick, but then it shot out quite skinny over here compared to how thick this stem over here is, right? So there's usually a direct correlation between the thickness of the stem and then the size of the leaves. Now it's still growing really slowly, even when juvenile. It doesn't produce a whole lot of leaves, right? But that's kind of also okay. Anyway, I really like this, which makes me think that I should have probably not used the thickest part of the stem. Shouldn't have used the top cutting to continue with. So the top cutting has the thickest stem, so it will reshoot the thickest. So I should have probably gone with some smaller cuttings further down on the pole. Now let's talk about these further cuttings. There were some unrooted cuttings throughout the process as well. Pretty certain what happened is I just propagated them in moss. I always have good success growing these plants in moss because they're also growing moss pots in the first place, right? So that's what they're used to. And then I think I passed them on as part of like a little winter prep sale that AJ and I put on, right? Because in winter I need to bring more plants in, so I can't just have them in my greenhouse and so on. So I sold a bunch of double ups. I have been contemplating asking Timmy for this plant back, but actually here's the perfect setup for that sort of plant. He needs small plants. He's got a cute window that comes kind of, it's like a skylight. So he needs some smaller plants, not some large plants like this. It's doing really well at his, so I'm gonna keep it there. Can't take it back. And that's it for today. Look, this is not a full plant spotlight on Philodendron sodiroi specifically. I already have one of those and I'll link it down in the description as well if you want to learn more about the species in itself. I think the main purpose of this video was really to number one, kind of stress the fact that bigger isn't always better. Not every plant looks better just because it's mature. Actually, quite a few plants that don't look good when they're mature. They look better in like the juvenile or even teenage stage. And secondly, that if nothing changes, nothing changes. You got to make some drastic changes if you don't like the current results, right? If you're doing the same thing expecting different results, then good luck. So I was pretty rough with this plant, but I think in the end it really worked out. And the other thing is, even looking back at the footage and editing myself, I was like, I clearly did not really plan this through. I clearly didn't really have a specific goal in mind or whatever. All I knew is that whatever I'm currently doing, I can't perpetuate. Otherwise, I will never be happy with the plant, right? So I just kind of went ahead, used my, let's say like instinct. Could I have done things better? Yeah, it's always easy to look back at my footage and think about, oh, I could have just done this or that and that, because I already know the end result. You know what I mean? Like I already know that, oh, that didn't work out, so I should have just done X, Y, Z instead. But in that moment, I don't know the end result yet, right? So I'm just doing like a best guess. I'm kind of just using my gut feeling. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But you know the beauty with plants, if it doesn't work out, we'll just try again. So yeah, hopefully this encourages you to go ahead and chop your plants. Sometimes the larger your plant, the more hesitant we are to chop it because, well, you spend a lot of time and effort into growing it that large. You don't want to ruin all your progress. But honestly, if you look at a plant and it doesn't bring you joy, then it's just a waste of space and your energy. It's supposed to be a fun hobby, so let's make it that way. Anyway, plenty for today. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and leave a nice comment. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye.